When I was a kid, I was a little weird. I'm talking baked beans on oatmeal cookies weird. Mayonnaise on cornbread weird. Asking my mom to quiet down kids at my birthday party so I could play the Super Mario theme on a kazoo weird. And I was okay with this. I embraced being weird. Yeah, kids teased me and friends were sparse, but it was my thing. It was as much a part of my identity then as neon shirts and loud jogger pants. Around 4th grade though, I learned a hard lesson. I'd heard about another kid who others called weird. Oh yay, I thought. I can finally make a friend who gets me. I tracked her down on the playground one day and received a shock. She was surrounded by popular kids. I discovered that while others considered her weird, they didn't think of her in the same way that they thought of me. Apparently, there was a difference between being weird and being a weirdo. But hey, who needs people when you have video games, am I right? I got an NES at 7 and an SNES at around 10. As much as I owed these systems for who I am today, video games became personal to me once I got a Game Boy in my preteens. It was a system that I didn't have to share. I could play when others wanted to watch TV. It was a private escape I could use anytime, anywhere. Surprisingly, I wasn't hot on the system when it first launched. This is supposed to be Mario? Please. By the time I got one, however, Game Boy had come into its own. Mario finally looked like Mario, Wario became a star quickly following his debut, and Kirby established his versatility. Most important of all, a new Zelda released, Link's Awakening. Besides the obvious thrill of getting a whole Zelda experience on a tiny cartridge, I was stoked to have a Zelda game all to myself. See, back in the day, Zelda games were often, quote, dad games. Stories abound of fathers who otherwise had no interest in video games getting deeply into the Zelda series. My household was no different. My father beat the first Zelda before I did, eagerly showing me his feat on tape after school one day. The first time A Link to the Past entered our threshold was when my father rented it, and none of us children were allowed to play it. So to get a Zelda game on a device for me and me alone was very exciting. Also, remember at this point, Link's Awakening was only the 4th game in the series. A Zelda template certainly existed, but Zelda 2's experimentation and A Link to the Past's epic scope made the future of the series seem unknowable. The commercial wasn't terribly helpful either.
Creeping through with an overhead view, 'cause a man's gotta do what a man's gotta do.
I had little idea what to expect the first time I put in the cartridge and switched on the power. Whoa, look at that pixel art! Link to the Past Spinning Triforce has nothing on this. Ditto for the game's use of the dark and stormy night intro. Getting rocked by a lightning bolt at sea beats the pants off of receiving a telepathic summons. As impressive as it is, this serious setup didn't prepare me for what happens next. So Link's stranded on an island called Koholint, and these two folks, Marin and her father Terran, have nursed him back to health. Link's first step is to search for his belongings, but before he goes, Terran has something for him. How did I know your name? Well, it's on the back of this shield. Huh, I didn't expect this kind of dialogue from a Zelda game. How weird. Link heads down to the beach, but without a weapon, all he can do is defend. Up until this game, Link automatically deflected attacks from the front. Here, though, the shield is considered an item, so a button must be pressed to raise it. This change sounds annoying, but I think it's super smart. Splitting up a simple action into a series of steps can certainly be taken too far. Just look at Chain of Memories, for example. Here, though, the extra bit of player interaction helps forge a stronger connection with Link. It also makes players feel smart when they realize that they need to shove these urchins out of the way to get to Link's sword. Upon finding the sword, a couple of things occur. First, Link meets this mysterious owl who will act as his guide throughout the game. He informs Link that leaving Koholint Island requires waking a mystical being known as the Windfish. This owl has no name, but he probably inspired the inclusion of Kaepora Gaebora in Ocarina of Time. Considering that Marin and Terran have analogs in that game too, it's pretty likely. Second, the game makes getting its starting sword way more epic than it has any right to be. It's also unintentionally hilarious if this urchin sits too close. This tickles me every time. Link's so caught up in the moment that he accidentally smacks this poor thing in his excitement. As As silly as this will sound, the way Link swings and holds his sword looks so cheap to me at first. It diminished my perception of this game as a real Zelda game. Remember, this Mario screamed knockoff to me, so the awkwardness of Link's sword bothered me. What came next didn't help either. Link must explore the mysterious forest to gain access to the first dungeon. Partway through, this raccoon hinders his progress by warping him away whenever he heads north. The raccoon reveals he has a sensitive nose, so the solution seems to be finding a pungent item. Link eventually discovers an aromatic mushroom, but it doesn't actually do anything to the raccoon. This stumped me for an embarrassingly long time. The solution is to have this witch turn the mushroom into magic powder, but I couldn't find her despite there being so few places to go early on. And when I finally did find her, I somehow got the idea that the raccoon was sensitive to smells, not dust, so I hesitated to turn in my mushroom. Speaking of being slow on the uptake, the association of Terran with mushrooms and raccoons didn't strike me as a Mario reference for years. It was a real Miles Prower moment. This back and forth of my early impressions of the game continued into the first dungeon. It's a fine starting dungeon, and it helped remind me that yes, I am playing a real Zelda game. There are some cool gameplay additions here too, with the compass now making a sound when you're in a room with a key. There are also these sweet little side-scrolling sections like in the first Zelda with... Is that a Goomba? Sure, there was a Yoshi doll earlier, but I thought that was just a cute nod to his rising stardom, which I covered in an earlier video if you're interested. The game gets stranger after obtaining this dungeon's item, the Rock's Feather. Now I can jump? I thought we left jumping back in Zelda 2. So now I'm Link jumping on Goombas underground. What is this game? Primed for more weirdness, I was immediately deflated upon meeting the first boss. Oh, Moldorm, I wanted a new boss. Moldorms can buy many new bosses. Explain how. Moldorms can be exchanged for time and resources. Woohoo! See, I didn't know it at the time, but Link's Awakening began as a Game Boy port of A Link to the Past. Many elements of that origin remain in the final game. For example, Moldorm, that witch that turns mushrooms into magic powder, Buzz Blobs, Lanmola, Armos Knight, Chain Chomps. You did remember Link to the Past has Chain Chomps, right? Not long after completing the dungeon, the owl reappears to explain your quest. Collect all 8 instruments of the sirens in order to wake the windfish. He also directs you to your next destination, which a disembodied voice already told Link before he left the dungeon. See, I never realized it before, but Link's Awakening contains a lot of handholding. There are multiple sources of guidance in this game. There's the voice after collecting an instrument, the owl, the sage stones within dungeons, quick messages when touching obstacles, and finally an old man named Ulrira. He is very shy in person, but he becomes a real chatterbox on the phone. Yes, I said phone. Koholint Island has a telephone system, and people get bent out of shape over the trains and spirit tracks. All of these guides make sense for a portable game, though. They enable players to quickly regain their bearings each play session. The world of Link's Awakening is also dealt out in small portions to further facilitate quick play. Koholint isn't as vast as Hyrule, and several obstacles gate Link's progress, prohibiting players from wandering aimlessly for too long. The game makes up for its smaller world, however, by making the most of what would become a Zelda staple: story quests between dungeons. This becomes quickly evident after returning to Mabe Village. The kids outside the library run up to Link in a panic. Bow Wow the Chain Chomp has been kidnapped by moblins. It was at this point during my first playthrough that my appreciation of Link's Awakening stabilized and steadily grew. This may not have been the Zelda game I expected, but it was becoming the Zelda game I needed. Bow Wow is held captive by the Moblin King, but how though? Bow Wow is totally savage. He's an insatiable beast capable of devouring nearly anything, including the indigestible flowers blocking the second dungeon entrance. He's not totally rude though, because he'll take the time to sniff out hidden items for Link. Exploring the world with him is great, but all good things must come to an end. Later, neither Prince Richard nor Kiki will help Link with Bow Wow around. Heck, that monkey will battle Bow Wow on sight. Link's interactions with the residents of Koholint are wonderful, and they continue throughout the game. During his journey, Link will learn Marin's deepest thoughts, help a forlorn ghost find peace, and resurrect a legendary rooster with a song he learned from Ward from Super Mario 2? So this is where you've been hiding. Alright, time to address the hippo in the room. Link's Awakening features several cameos from other video games. The Mario series has the most reps. A whole menagerie of Mushroom Kingdom meanies awaits Link underground. That prince from earlier comes from a Japan-exclusive game for Frog the Bell Tolls, which explains why his house is full of frogs. SimCity's Dr. Wright appears as a lover of letters because, get it? Right? Right? And of course, who can forget dear old Anti-Kirby? You can tell he's an Anti-Kirby because he says Oyop instead of Poyo. Despite some of their derivative origins, all of these characters and events make Koholint much sillier than Hyrule. A lengthy trading quest hammers this home further, playing host to some of the game's funniest moments. Hey, wanna see how fast I can eat a pineapple? Should I tell him that's not her picture? She got the broom! When I reached the boss of the third dungeon, I realized that rehash fights like Moldorm wouldn't be the norm. Altogether, the bosses of Link's Awakening are a motley lot. A giant slime, a giant fish, a giant bird. Okay, so none of them are as complex or as intense as those in Link to the Past, but there's one thing they do that those bosses don't. They talk. Their brief lines before and after each fight make things a little more personal, and personal is exactly what I want when I'm fighting a giant face on the floor. Ugh. Link's Awakening also introduced proper mini-bosses to the series. They're often much more creative than the main bosses, and Master Stalfos is the best of them all. After Link first fights him, he steals the dungeon's item from its chest and challenges Link to take it back. A chunk of this dungeon then becomes a hunt for the big bonehead. In retrospect, I'm amazed that not only did Link's Awakening introduce fighting mini-bosses to gain dungeon items, it subverts the idea partway through the game. The dungeons themselves are no slouch either. Despite the limitations of the Game Boy, these are genuine Zelda dungeons. They join the labyrinthian layouts of the first Zelda with the clever mechanisms of A Link to the Past. The aforementioned underground areas add in something new to the Something's Borrowed. All of this combines to create worthy challenges which impressively scale throughout. The game's standout dungeon is definitely Eagle Tower. This is the only dungeon with multiple floors, and reaching the boss at the top requires bringing down the house. The support columns can only be destroyed by this giant metal ball, and figuring out how to get it everywhere it needs to be is immensely satisfying. Eagle Tower isn't just the best dungeon in Link's Awakening, it's easily among the best dungeons in the series. Also aces in this game, the music. The fourth dungeon is the base of Tall Tall Heights, and oh, listen to this. Much like Super Mario Land 2, much of Link's Awakening's soundtrack utilizes leitmotifs. This makes sense since both soundtracks were handled by Kazumi Totaka, best known as the inspiration for KK Slider and the dude who hides a signature melody in games. Besides using leitmotifs from the main Zelda theme, an entirely new one emerges in the tracks for caves and dungeons. It's simple, but its variations nonetheless instill these areas with the appropriate ambiance. Additionally, several effective musical stings and brief one-off tunes punctuate key moments in the game. All of them add to the playfulness and mystery of Koholint Island. Most of my initial concerns about Link's Awakening faded by the time I completed the 5th dungeon. By this point, I had met plenty of fun characters, witnessed all sorts of goofy goings-on, and thoroughly enjoyed the game's surprisingly robust dungeons. And look at this, the flippers let you dive underwater now. Cool! I was finally confident that not only was I playing a real Zelda game, but a Zelda game crafted for a weirdo like me. And then, the Southern Face Shrine challenged everything I thought I knew. Clues about the true nature of Koholint dot the island. Link encounters references to sleep and inhabitants who have no concept of anything outside the island or the present. At the time, I thought I had it figured out. Obviously, Koholint was a realm through which people sometimes pass when asleep or unconscious. When the lightning bolt struck Link, he wound up here. The nightmares keep him from leaving, and they trap the windfish in an egg to keep it from interfering. It all made sense. Kinda. I was wrong. The Isle of Koholint is but an illusion. Human, monster, sea, sky, a scene in the lid of a sleeper's eye. Awake the dreamer, and Koholint will vanish, much like a bubble on a needle. None of it is real. The owl quickly claims that no one knows for sure, but I could already see where this game was going. Koholint Island and all of its inhabitants are merely the windfish's dream. Wandering the countryside with Bow Wow? Not real. Watching Terran immediately regret his life choices? Not real. Sharing a special moment with Marin, watching the waves. Not real. I thought I had found a friend in this game. Its weird mishmash of elements reminded me of playing with my clashing assortment of toys from bargain bins and McDonald's Happy Meals. It's so bizarrely imaginative, but it's not real. None of it matters. Despite my sudden disillusionment, I still found myself appreciating the construction of the game's final dungeons. The boss banter, however, takes a turn. The nightmares now remind Link exactly of what will happen if he wakes the windfish. Link's success will mean the end of Koholint and all who dwell upon it. Their warnings would have given me pause if I thought any of this was real anymore. With all 8 instruments of the sirens in tow, all that remains is to wake the windfish and let come what may. Is it just me, or does it sound somber? The finale of Link's Awakening can be unevenly paced for the unprepared. The windfish's egg is a puzzle in the vein of Zelda 1's Lost Woods. First-time players will have to immediately leave if they haven't completed the trading quest. The magnifying lens at the end of the sequence allows Link to discover a solution in Mabe Village's library. The egg can be brute forced, but with multiple possible solutions, it's not recommended. Then there's the last boss. It takes on multiple forms, which is cool, but most of their vulnerabilities aren't immediately obvious. This can result in a lot of flailing and lengthy stretches of experimentation. Many of these forms can take a lot of hits too, which means even past Zelda knowledge won't make the fights go that much faster. I really like the final form though. Link must employ old-fashioned eye shooting and newfangled jumping to win. With the final nightmare defeated, the windfish appears before Link. After explaining the origins of Koholint Island, that it is indeed born of its dreams, it bids Link to play the Song of Awakening one last time. Koholint is about to vanish forever. But that's okay. It's not real. Why am I crying? If it's not real, then why am I crying? because it is real. During their meeting, the Windfish tells Link this.
When I dost awaken, Koholint will be gone. Only the memory of this dreamland will exist in the waking world. Someday, thou may recall this island. That memory must be the real dream world.
Despite being an illusion within the context of the game, my experiences on Koholint Island remain imprinted on my memory over 25 years later. Bow Wow, Terran, Marin, and the rest are as real as the emotions I or anyone else feels every time we recall them. The reality of Koholint exists within everyone who's ever played Link's Awakening, especially those who have been as moved by it as I have. And for a weirdo like me, knowing I'm not so alone in the world is a very comforting thought. The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening is a very special game. What started as a port of a previous Zelda game instead came to both influence the design of future series installments and provide an unforgettable journey all its own. The setting of Koholint enlivens what could have been a standard adventure game with silly characters, quirky humor, and an intriguing mystery. Nintendo's decision to remake Link's Awakening on Switch goes to show that a game this memorably strange is truly too weird to die.